Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is October 14th, 2020, and we have a really important show today. We're going to be talking about a class of drugs that may actually help progress Alzheimer's disease, especially if you are predisposed to it in one way or another. And people need to understand this. Before we get into that, we are going to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods. EatLegendary.com. Use the code SHR10 for 10% off your entire purchase. Of course, if you are a low-carb, low-sugar person, you're going to love Legendary Foods. Check them out. Be sure to try their tasty pastry. It is a Pop-Tart with less than 1 gram of sugar and 9 grams of high-quality, high-leucine protein. You'll love it. The kids will love it. They won't know it's healthy. If they're going back to school, put it in their lunchbox. Again, eatlegendary.com. The code is SHR10 for 10% off. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lisa Delano-Wood and Alex Weigand. How are you today?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
You made me really hungry listening to the Pop-Tarts.
Oh,
yeah, sounds like a good snack.
They don't last long in my home, I can tell you that. So I'm going to start with Alex because I believe that she's actually the lead author on this paper, correct?
She is.
Okay.
Yes.
So Alex, what research preceded this research that made you look at this class of drugs and look for a connection to Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, it's a great question. What kind of spurred our research in the first place? So I, in general, am interested in biological markers and risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. And what I'm particularly interested in, and I think Dr. Delano-Wood is as well, is individuals who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease but don't yet have the disease. And so we really want to know what factors are going to increase the risk in people who are doing okay right now. Right. So that ideally we can intervene early and prevent any future decline. And so I came to San Diego with that broad research interest. And then I met Dr. Delano-Wood and started working in her memory clinic that she's the director of. And I'll let her kind of explain what spurred her interest in anticholinergic medications in particular. But it was kind of the combination of her clinical interests and my research interests that really got us wanting to look at this more. So, Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Alex, I have to ask, why this topic? Did you have someone in your family that succumbed to Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's something that many of us go into the field for, right? Because we have a personal connection to it. So I do have several family members who have Alzheimer's disease, grandparents, a parent, other extended family members. And so it's something that is really near and dear to my heart and something that I definitely want to ideally spend the rest of my life studying and trying to find a cure for. And in terms of anticholinergic medications in particular, it's something I had kind of began to notice is that some family members who were on a lot of medications seemed to be having a lot more cognitive problems than others. And I, at the time, wasn't really sure if there was a connection there. But it was something that was kind of in the back of my mind as I began researching this field.
And
Delano-Woods, please explain.
I was just going to piggyback onto that. So as Alex mentioned, I've been directing a memory clinic. It's sort of an interdisciplinary clinic that works with folks who have some concerns about their cognition. And so we're housed at UCSD, and we've been open since 2014. And over time, I just started noticing that there were kind of a sort of a chunk of patients coming in having memory trouble, often at younger ages, way out of kind of whack for what you'd expect based on their age. And started noticing that many of them, it was really just kind of like anecdotally, I'm noticing really long medical lists of drugs that they're taking daily. And started asking more questions about this, started asking about supplements as well and over-the-counter medications that they might be taking. Started to do research on my own because I'm a PhD, I'm not a medical doctor, but I started noticing this link. Folks looking like they didn't have often other risk factors for Alzheimer's disease, but they looked like on paper and after taking our tests, looked like they may be in the early stages. And really, it just came down to kind of what might be explaining this for these individuals. We've ruled out everything else. We look for vitamin deficiencies. We look for, history of stroke, all kinds of things. And I started just wondering more and more about the medication lists. And I noticed that some of them would come up, different drugs would come up often in the medication list for the patients I was seeing. And found that there's actually a fairly large body of research in this area. And this coincided with when Alex joined us here in San Diego. I said, gosh, I'd really like to embark upon this study. Would you want to sort of do this with me? And, she just jumped right on board with this and put together really an elegant study that I wouldn't have thought to put together. It's so well done the way that she referenced the medication dosages to the older adult population, the analyses that she ran, and the way that she tied much of the findings to Alzheimer's biomarkers in each of the participants in the study. So that's sort of a long answer to your question, but it was just anecdotally noticed this link in my own clinic work. And as we learn, in grad school, often our clinical work informs our research. And this is really, I think, a great example of that.
Yeah, and a lot of great discoveries occur from connecting dots that other people just kind of step over. And when you start to look at the drugs that people are taking, and you realize that there seems to be some commonality in the drugs and certain symptoms. And it's very fascinating to me. So, Alex, first of all, we're talking about anticholinergic drugs. So let's discuss this class of drugs for a second. Anticholinergic drugs are used for a variety of different things, from incontinence in women to nerve function issues. Talk about these drugs, Alex.
Yeah, so they're surprisingly common, and a lot of people don't know that they all fall under this one class that we call anticholinergic. And so, yeah, you mentioned a few, potential uses for these drugs. You're right, urinary incontinence. Other common ones are allergies, which are available as over-the-counter medications. A lot of medications for various heart or cardiovascular conditions. So it's really across a range of different ailments that people may have and may be taking these medications for. And often these medications are prescribed for these sort of what we call peripheral types of conditions, something that doesn't really have to do with the brain, right? Be it incontinence or cardiovascular disease. But what we know from past research is that these medications actually have a big effect on the brain, even though they're not prescribed for anything related to the brain. And that effect is a negative one. And so the way that anticholinergic medications work is that there is a chemical in the brain called acetylcholine, right? And that chemical in the brain helps us with our thinking and memory. So the more of that chemical we have, the better we'll do in our general day-to-day thinking. When we take anticholinergic medications, it actually reduces that chemical. And that's where we think the mechanism is, where it can actually impair our thinking and memory if we're taking these medications at too high of dosages or for too long of a time.
So the funny thing is that we talk a lot about nootropics on this show. And some of the nootropics are cholinergic. They're choline-based products. And so we know that acetylcholine and its donor choline, improve brain function, cognition, memory, and so on. So when you think about these drugs that are actually anticholinergic, it makes perfect sense that they're affecting the brain. So did you find any, is it, well, describe the study. How was this study designed? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so first I want to describe what was really different about our study in the beginning. So as Dr. Delano-Wood alluded to, there is an existing body of literature in the research that talks about how these drugs impact individuals who already have Alzheimer's disease or who have dementia. But as I mentioned before, with mine and Dr. Delano-Wood's research interests, we're really interested in people who are at risk for Alzheimer's disease, but don't yet have any cognitive problems. So where our study was unique in the first place was that we were looking at older adults who weren't having any memory or thinking problems when they initially started this study, rather than people who were already having some cognitive problems. So that's kind of where we wanted to start, was to see how these drugs impacted people who were what we call cognitively normal. So we took this group of about 700 older adults around age 70 to 80 who were cognitively normal at the beginning of the study. And we gave them, or they were given, a battery of memory and thinking tests to determine where their cognitive level was at. And so what we really wanted to see was, over time, how these individuals would progress in their cognition, and whether those who were taking anticholinergic medications would progress at a faster rate or would decline at a faster rate. So in our initial phase of the study, we just separated the study participants into those who were taking at least one anticholinergic medication, which was about a third of the sample, and those who were taking no anticholinergic medications, and found that those who were taking anticholinergics actually had almost 50% increased risk of developing mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's disease.
That's a significant amount. That's a significant
amount. It is. Yeah, we were certainly surprised by the degree to which these were having an effect.
And I'd like to say, Alex,
and then beyond
your first analysis, she showed that 75% of the sample were on 2 to 4 times the recommended dosages, what they call the minimally efficacious dose for the medications. We didn't even think that we'd encounter that. So sorry to interrupt you, Alex.
Were they self-medicating with higher doses, or were they misprescribed higher doses?
So, I mean, I won't make any claims as to misprescription, since we aren't medical professionals, but I will say what I think was happening is that with older adults, they're generally more sensitive to these medications, which means that they need less of it in order to get the same effect, right? So older adults need less of the medication to get
pandemic
the same
preschool here. Sorry.
And yet these older adults may have been being prescribed as if they were 40 years old, say, right? And it wasn't really taking into account the fact that they're 80 years old and they're more sensitive to these medications, and therefore we should be giving them lower dosages. So when I conducted our study, I was really careful to make sure that we were looking at what would be the most effective dose for older adults rather than for the general adult population, and taking that into account, since there is that difference there. So it's definitely possible that the dosages were too high just for reasons that really weren't being considered, since these drugs, as I mentioned, are often prescribed for conditions that have nothing to do with the brain, and it's possible that there are some physicians prescribing these medications who aren't aware of their negative effects on the brain, and therefore aren't being as careful with their dosing.
So you did blood work to identify markers, right? Is that how you identified the markers that you associate with the onset of Alzheimer's?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we can actually do it through one of the markers we looked at was a genetic marker, which we can identify through saliva. And then another marker we looked at was a cerebral spinal fluid marker. So that's the fluid that kind of surrounds your brain and your spine. And we can just you stick a needle in a person's lower back and just extract a little bit of the fluid in a procedure. It's a relatively common procedure. And you can get a lot of really great biological data that way, because it gives us an insight into what's going on in a person's brain without actually looking in their brain. We're just looking at the fluid that surrounds their brain. And there's a certain protein in that fluid where if you have higher levels of it, it really signifies an increased risk for Alzheimer's disease.
What is that? What's the name of it?
So it's there are actually two proteins, and we looked at the ratio of the two. One of the proteins is called tau, and the other is called amyloid. And since early
both
1900s,
with Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease.
Yes,
so,
yeah. Since the early 1900s, they've been considered to be the two primary markers of Alzheimer's disease, as well as other neurodegenerative conditions. So definitely an important marker to have.
Dr. Delano-Wood, so acetylcholine esterase is the brake where acetylcholine is the gas pedal, right? I mean, simplistically. Is there any evidence that maybe some people overproduce acetylcholine esterase and maybe they're more prone to these anticholinergic drugs causing bad things for them because you have the brake on real hard and then you're removing the gas pedal entirely?
I haven't seen any data to that effect. Clearly we know that there are links to medical conditions, medications, neurodegenerative disorders. But we know that there is variability in different brain structures that we know, that are important for memory. So, for example, the hippocampi it's the most important memory structure in the brain, and it is heavily, dependent upon levels of acetylcholine to function. And some people, it's an interesting question that you pose. Some people are born with very large hippocampi, and we know it's normally distributed in the population. Some just have smaller hippocampi. There's a debate about, do people who maybe are born with smaller hippocampi, are they more vulnerable? Do they not have as much, cognitive reserve to contend with neurodegeneration over time, collapse across just normal aging anyway? So it's hard to say. There may be some sort of link. I haven't myself seen any data to that effect. Have you, Alex?
No, I haven't seen any data either. And I think I agree with you. It's likely that there's inter-individual variability in those factors, just as there are with a lot of different brain processes. And it's certainly true that, there could be differences in, acetylcholine esterase. There could be differences in the number of acetylcholine receptors that are on a certain brain structure, which will reduce the effect of acetylcholine overall. There could be differences in the size of the brain structure that produces acetylcholine. And those are things we don't really know of in terms of existing individual differences, but we do know that all of those things are impacted on the trajectory to Alzheimer's disease. And that's why actually one of the treatments now for Alzheimer's disease, which just is a symptomatic treatment rather than a cure, it actually is an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, which is a lot of double negatives, but essentially just means that it will lead to more acetylcholine in your brain, therefore helping thinking and memory.
It will spare the acetylcholine. That's right. Because, sarin gas, which we all heard about years and years ago, is a very powerful form of acetylcholine esterase that lets all the acetylcholine at nerve synapses just run wild, and and every organ fails, and you just that's it, you're dead. So we know that acetylcholine esterase is very powerful, even in very, very small doses. So when we look at the aging brain, right? Obviously, these drugs are doing something that the normal brain shouldn't do, because we're using these anticholinergic drugs. They're causing the problem. But does your research also possibly point to a stronger role in acetylcholine in the onset of Alzheimer's disease, you think?
It's a good question, and I'm not quite sure that our research directly points to that. But I do think that in researching this paper, I was finding a lot of links between acetylcholine and Alzheimer's disease. And that was a hypothesis, the cholinergic hypothesis of Alzheimer's, that was pretty popular, I think, maybe back in the 90s. I'll admit that was before I was born, so I'm not quite sure of the timeline. But it kind of died off in favor, and we haven't really been looking at it as much as we had in the past. And so I think there's a small contingent of researchers that are really finding that it is a really important factor. And I think there needs to be a resurgence of research into acetylcholine and the region in particular that produces acetylcholine, which we know is especially vulnerable to Alzheimer's disease pathology. I think really increasing research in that area could lead to a lot of new discoveries. And I think our study, although it doesn't directly address it, I think it brings people's attention back to the fact that this cholinergic pathway can be really important in Alzheimer's.
And there's more traction, I think, for this type of research, though I think the knowledge is just not out there as much as we'd like it, particularly in primary care. But we're getting the message out. Alex was so patient. We actually spent a couple of years trying to get this published, and we wouldn't relent until, we wanted this to be in a high traffic journal like Neurology, because we knew there's sort of this broad readership, and that we would get, attention and kind of a light shown on this. The good news is that there are a few currently running studies that are called de-prescribing trials. One of our co-authors is running one of those out in Indiana at Purdue. And so it's nice that there is, slowly but surely, there is more recognition and ways in which they're flagging older adults who maybe present in the emergency department to say, hey, they're on a couple hard-hitting anticholinergics, and let's take a look at this and see, A, do they really need to be on that medication? And B, what's the dosing on that? And let's ask some questions about how they're doing cognitively. So I think that there is more recognition that acetylcholine is important, and that it may have impacts on all aging people, but particularly on those who have specific Alzheimer's risk factors, which is what Alex shows.
There are over-the-counter anticholinergic drugs too. That's another problem. Yes. So we talk about the doctors are prescribing, but I remember there was an article I read for men with ED that taking an NSAID and a large a dose of anticholinergic, they named some allergy medication you could pick up at Walgreens. So we know that these anticholinergic drugs are out there over the counter. So we don't even know. Some people, when you look at self-reporting, you find that people underreport things that they think are bad behavior and overreport things that they think are good behavior. So there may be a lot of people out there who no one realizes they're taking strong anticholinergic drugs and doses that aren't appropriate for their age.
I love that you bring that up, Carl, because I've now trained myself to directly ask every single patient. I over time, I've gotten more pointed with it. And now I just ask if they have sleeping problems. And then I'm very clear about, have you taken Benadryl to sleep? And I go right to it, because otherwise it doesn't often become uncovered. Sometimes patients say, well, I would never tell my real doctor this. But yes, I take NyQuil every night, and various other meds that are out there. And so it is something that I think, in fairness, a lot of physicians just don't know about what kind of meds patients are taking over the counter. I think maybe they're not asking, but maybe patients aren't thinking to tell them. And I've never met a patient in all these years who has known about this link, that there are some medications that they are taking that are, quote, anticholinergic, and they don't really know what that means. So we spend a lot of time in the clinic trying to educate folks around that. But it is really important, because I think that just as much as we're seeing a lot of people on, what was the mean in the study, Alex? Mean number of anticholinergics, was it almost 6?
I think it was about 6 or 7.
Holy mackerel.
People were on, they're just on like a laundry list of these medications.
Realize, right? They're taking all these drugs and they happen to have anticholinergics in them. They're taking all these over-the-counter remedies, and they all, because nowadays everything's a kitchen sink blend. Cough, cold, expectorant, fever, antipyretic. It's like they put 16 different drugs in something. You go home and you take it for one reason, and the other 15 you didn't need. And so, good. I'm sorry.
No, and that's what we're seeing is that patients are, so for example, a major class of drugs that are being taken by folks who are taking anticholinergics, they're for sort of neuropathic pain, nerve pain, and back pain. And these can be pretty hard hitting as far as anticholinergic stores. And they're not getting benefit. Many studies have shown about a third of patients will get clinically significant benefit from these meds. So that means that, another 2/3 are taking these medications, really not seeing much of it, if any, benefit. And so that what people are starting to ask is, are you taking these meds? Are they helping you? How long have you been on these meds? So a lot of patients wouldn't even be able to tell us why they're still taking these particular medications, if they're really benefiting the patient or not. And so as something that we're really hoping for is that physicians and patients will sort of talk more, do things like what we call a medication reconciliation, sort of revisit often the medications that they're on, really look at that clinical benefit, try adjunctive therapies, like for depression, psychotherapy, for example, or meditation, yoga, and be thinking about these effects, particularly when patients are on more than one anticholinergic. But we don't want to downplay. I think these medications can be really important for a lot of people and benefit many people. And that, patients who are thinking about trying to come off some of these medications really need to do it in concert with their physician and taper off, but really have that conversation. So it's a real balance, right? I mean, these medications are critical for a lot of people, but for many, they're not helpful and actually harmful.
Alex, and I'm going to go to you before we take a break, but this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. Okay. And I'll tell you why I say that. I know so many older people who use, now I realize, anticholinergics to help them sleep at night. Mm-hmm. And they're not aging well. And, I know young people that are using them, and so I don't know how many doses of, NyQuil is sold every year, but it's really scary. So many people use these drugs, and they are drugs, for inappropriate reasons. They're using them because they want to sleep, as opposed to the real the real reason, like the flu or something like that. It's really scary because, Dr. Dale Bredesen has been on this show 4 times. The first time he was on the show was when he first published the first 22 patient study from UCLA, I believe it was. And now he's written a fantastic book, End of Alzheimer's. I've never talked to him about this. We've talked about genetic predispositions, inflammatory Alzheimer's, wet Alzheimer's. We talk about all these different things, and we talk about lifestyles, which I have a question when we come back from the break about that. But I've never heard him talk about anticholinergic drugs. And he's top of the food chain right now in the Alzheimer's space. And I think you guys have bumped into something that is like unbelievable right now. This is really amazing and it's not even the cholinergics that are being prescribed. It's the stuff that people are just buying at the grocery store or Walgreens and just downing on their own.
I think it's a good point. We've kind of got problems on both sides of it, sort of the prescription, but the over the counter as well, and the dosing. But you have sometimes older adults, like I think you alluded to this, Carl, kind of tweaking their own dosages themselves. Yeah. I'll just double up, I'm not sleeping very well, whether it's over the counter or prescription. So it's very complicated.
Alex, so the effects of the anticholinergic were fairly acute, right? Was there a long onset to start to see cognitive changes, or were they relatively short?
We found that it was relatively short. So when we looked at people who progressed to mild cognitive impairment, we looked over a period of 10 years, but there were a number of people who progressed within the first 2 to 3 years. And then beyond that, we also looked at individuals' rate of decline in certain domains of cognition. So in their memory, in their language, in their thinking abilities. And we found that people who are on anticholinergics, even within a 2 to 3 year period, were showing a faster rate of decline on these different cognitive abilities, which really suggests that it is a pretty fast onset. And something that we don't know that I would love to study in the future is really looking at the cumulative effect of these medications. So we were just examining people who we saw were on these medications at one time point for at least a few months. But it's possible some people were taking these medications for 10, 20 years. You mentioned young people take these medications. I know I take allergy medications, and so it really makes you question, at what point should we start considering these effects, and not just in older adults, but also in younger adults? And I know, reflecting on it for myself, I've thought, well, I would just kind of take an allergy medication every day just because I didn't think it really mattered, and just in case I had a bad day. And since doing the study, I've realized, well, maybe I should kind of start to be more take into more consideration when I should take the medication, when I shouldn't, instead of just absentmindedly taking it every day. Same thing for sleep medications, right? Maybe it's less important to take them on the weekend if you don't have to get up early for an appointment. So I think these medications do have a powerful effect, and we really need to consider the time course and making sure we're intervening with these things early, and overall just increasing everyone's awareness of these medications and their potential negative effects.
Because people think if they could pick it up at, over the counter, it's innocuous. It's no big deal. Oh, well, this is over the counter. I don't have to worry about it. I can take it as much as I want. And that's just not true. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about metabolic disorders and how it correlates with the effects of these anticholinergic drugs. Because I'm wondering sometimes, we know that people who are metabolically deranged, they tend to develop Alzheimer's more frequently. So there has to be an intersect somewhere. And maybe they're not taking anticholinergic drugs, but in fact, maybe there's some sort of intersect between these two domains. So let's do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. You're listening to Superhuman Radio.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
I love beef. And if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 25% off all beef and free shipping on orders of $100 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again.
Want to improve mental energy and focus? Try the new Superhuman Stack from Pure Nootropics. Stack Dynamine, L-Butamin, Theocrine, and palmitoyl ethanolamide together and feel the lights go on in your brain. Find your perfect mix of these four. Carl likes 1 cap of each and 2 caps of Dynamine. Bam! Lights on. Go to shrnetwork.biz/superhuman stack, all one word, today, and get yours for 25% off plus free shipping. That's shrnetwork.biz/superhuman stack. When craving a snack, reach for Select Savory Snack Sugar-Free Biltong, the healthy alternative to sugar-laden beef jerky. They use a fattier cut of beef, making it more tender and flavorful. For mealtime, choose from their 63 seasonings, which are sugar and additive-free. From chipotle rub to savory pumpkin spice, you'll find an option to suit your palate. Go to shrnetwork.biz/SSS today. Use code SHR15 to save 15% on any meat snack or seasoning. Savor the flavor today. New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
You've heard me talk about the chill pill on the show and how effective it is at helping people who suffer from social anxiety, or sometimes when you just want to take the edge off to a long, stressful day. Well, listen to this story from Dylan Goutreau.
Definitely takes anxiety away, which I have a long history of having. Started out at 2 milligrams a day of Xanax. That was at 8 years old. And so I stopped using benzos 3 years ago. Extremely difficult. Yeah, so I spent about 3 years trying to find anything and everything I could that would be healthy for me to help with anxiety. Because I'm talking, full out panic attack. The chill pill was the first thing that I found that actually in the middle of a panic attack I can take, and it definitely subsides.
Go to drseeds.com. That's DRSEEDS.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your first bottle of the chill pill. Check it out. I promise this is one supplement that delivers.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Lisa Delano-Wood and Alex Weigand, who is a doctoral student. So, obviously, this situation of developing Alzheimer's disease is multifactorial. We know that now. And this obviously plays a role. Anticholinergic drugs play a strong role. We know that. What about the metabolically deranged individual, right? Somebody who is, these are the people who tend to develop these types of problems. Where is the intersect in your research and some of the other research out there that shows what happens to the metabolically deranged brain?
Want to go first, Alex? Or
Sure, I'll go ahead. So I'll admit that I don't do very much direct research into this area, but can speak to what I know about it. And we do know in general that metabolic conditions, that the gut microbiome, that all of these things have an impact on the brain, right? Even though they're not directly related to the brain doesn't work in isolation. It works in concert with the rest of the body, similar to how we know that cardiovascular conditions that affect the heart can also affect the brain through blood flow. So I think all of these sort of peripheral factors are really important to consider in the pathogenesis or the onset of Alzheimer's disease. I think interestingly, where metabolism may intersect with our research on anticholinergic medications is that metabolic disorders can really affect the way that these medications are metabolized, right? So the way that they're absorbed, the way that they're excreted, the way that they're distributed throughout the body. And it's possible that individuals with certain metabolic conditions, it may either lower the levels of anticholinergic medications they're taking, or it may exacerbate them. And of course, that will have downstream effects in affecting the brain and the potential for Alzheimer's disease.
Interesting thought, Alex. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that individual variability on that. But I think this is a really good point, Carl. And we didn't spend much time in the paper and linking to inflammation, and part of that is sort of word limits, and the study was already really enormous, and I'm thinking you've given us a good idea for maybe a follow-up study, because we know that there is a link between sort of metabolic deterioration and neuroinflammation and what we see in Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative disorders. I think it's pretty, the good news is that this is a growing area of research. There are more folks, devoting time to trying to study the link between inflammation and neurodegeneration. It's poorly understood at this time, but it's something certainly that we can look into. We know acetylcholine dampens down inflammation, and so perhaps if you're on these medications that are blocking acetylcholine production and the effects between synapses, that then maybe you're allowing for more inflammation to sort of take over. But definitely an interesting question and something that we want to study more in the future.
Also, were you able to look at dietary choline intake in these individuals? So many people are afraid of eggs today. I mean, I just ate a half a dozen eggs before the show today. I eat a lot of eggs. I love eggs. They're a great source of protein.
So
they're magic. But so many people, they won't eat an egg because they're afraid of cholesterol. It's like, so
right.
What about dietary choline intake? Is it possible that could offset some of these problems? Is it possible that because people are so choline scared that there could be a different outcome with somebody who's consuming more choline in their diet?
What a great idea! That's a third paper, Alex.
Yeah, it is.
I want to be on the paper. I want to have my name on the paper.
Why don't you come help us write this?
And you have, and then this big dummy, and then you put my name underneath it.
No, superhuman. Come on.
Yeah. The fear of choline. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think it's good things to think about. Just in general, the effect of nutrition and what we can gain from these lifestyle factors on how it impacts on how it impacts the brain and our cognitive health. I'm not very familiar, to be honest, with the notion of, choline in food and people avoiding it, but it makes sense, like you say, people avoiding certain foods because they have connotations of it. And what we do know in terms of diet impacting Alzheimer's is that there is a link there, right? We do know that nutrition is really important, especially since it's one of the areas where we can intervene. In Alzheimer's, there's so many areas that can't intervene yet because we don't have the medical treatments for it. But diet, we can. And, a Mediterranean diet, so lots of omega-3s, fish, nuts, seeds, and of course, eating your leafy greens. We know that can have a positive impact on the brain and may do so through things like Dr. Delano-Wood mentioned, such as inflammation. But I'll let Dr. Delano-Wood speak to this more if she has anything to add.
I think that was all wonderful. And I would say that, as Alex was being born, it was becoming more, when I entered the field, it was funny. We used to think of the brain as so separate from the heart. And so this idea that vascular risk factors like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all these things might impact the brain was really shockingly foreign. It really was. And it's really kind of gained so much favor. It's now like not really debated anymore that there are these important links between vascular risk factors and brain health, and even links to Alzheimer's disease. More recently, so once I say Alex kind of started moving into this field, there has been this new zeitgeist or this pendulum swing to, and it really dovetails with what you're doing, Carl, trying to get the word out, that as Alex said, sort of these environmental factors are really critical. So the National Institutes of Health, for example, is kind of going all in on diet and exercise as modifiers of brain function. And some of the really promising studies are showing you can bend the curve on Alzheimer's disease, even in people who are clinically, they're on the path. And she references sort of one diet, the Mediterranean diet. And so we recommend to all of our patients, hey, there are like 100 books out there. Go find one. Try to stick to something like this. There's the MIND diet. There's Dale Bredesen's, diet. But certainly there is a strong link. But I will admit our field is kind of new on the scene. And your idea, Carl, to sort of say, well, what supplements are people taking that might have choline in them, and how are they eating, is an understudied question in general, but it is something that we really should look more at when we're trying to look at these analyses and make these conclusions, in terms of implications of the science.
So sleep is critical for memory consolidation, obviously. And we would talk about Alzheimer's disease and stuff like that. We're talking about memory consolidation. Things get fragmented. The brain isn't storing things the way it's supposed to. Short-term memory is gone, but you can remember something that happened to you when you were 4 years old. So obviously the brain is functioning, but it's like it needs to be defragged, or everything needs to go be in and retagged again. So what about sleep in the role? And I say this specifically because a lot of people take NyQuil. They take these drugs.
That's the one I was forgetting. Yeah.
They take these drugs to sleep. My father did it, and he really declined when he started using that, now that I think back. But what about these drugs? What if the real harm that these drugs are doing is at night, when memory consolidation actually occurs, when your hard drive gets defragged and everything gets indexed, if the effect is at nighttime? Do we know that?
I think that's genius. That's a fourth paper now. Are you taking notes, Alex?
No, sleep is such an important area and such a growing area of research, for lots of different reasons. You brought up the notion of memory consolidation, which is really important, right? We can form these memories throughout the day, but they don't really turn into long-term memories unless we consolidate them, and that happens really rapidly during sleep. And so it's kind of a tricky balance, because we want someone to get a good night's sleep, because we know if they have poor sleep, that will lead to an increase in Alzheimer's pathology, amyloid and tau that I mentioned earlier. But then we also don't necessarily want them to be taking too many medications that put themselves to sleep if those medications are going to also increase their risk, right? So it's a delicate balance. And I think it's up to being careful about not self-medicating, but make sure you're working with a doctor. And also examining options for sleep that don't have an impact on the cholinergic system. So, one that's over the counter is melatonin, right? And that can be a good option to help with sleep. And
25 years I've been using melatonin.
Exactly. Yeah, I think melatonin is great. And if people find that isn't working for them, there are other sleep drugs you can get through a prescription that don't really impact the cholinergic system as strongly. And I, would, if you're having sleep difficulties, I would encourage anyone to explore alternative options other than Benadryl or NyQuil, for example, and really consider working with a doctor, because we do know the importance of sleep in reducing Alzheimer's pathology. And then it's a feedback loop where if you have more Alzheimer's pathology, it's more likely to affect the brain's region that produces acetylcholine. And so if you're attacking the brain region that produces acetylcholine, you're going to have even less. And that leads to effectively what would be the same as taking an anticholinergic medication. So it's a really interesting dynamics between sleep and medications. And I think the bottom line is that sleep is really important. So if you need to take medications to get a good sleep, that's okay. But just make sure you're doing it with your doctor and being really cognizant of the type of medications you're taking.
The problem is a lot of these. Yeah, sorry, go please.
I was just going to piggyback on that, Carl. What you were getting to, which is that often what these sleep agents do is they block stage 4 sleep. People think they're sleeping better because of these medications, but they're not actually getting in that restorative stage 4 sleep. And that's when we know the brain is really doing the most work to clear itself of the very proteins that we know are building up in Alzheimer's disease, amyloid and tau. I just want to make sure to say that. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, no. And I was actually about to speak to that. I was about to say, sleep is when the brain defrags. And, and taking a drug that I've said for years on this show, like taking a drug that makes you lay still for 8 hours isn't sleep. I can hit you in the head with a hammer and you can lay still for 5 or 6 hours. You're not going to wake up from that and go, wow, I feel great. I mean, sleep has an architecture. And if you don't adhere to that architecture, certain things start to go wonky in the body. And so I think that I also wonder if the combination of some of these sleep drugs in combination with some other things that you may be looking at could be like the push-pull. If somebody's using a strong sleep drug, a lot of times they disrupt sleep architecture. And when memories are supposed to be, stored and the brain is supposed to be defragged, it's not. I wonder if they play a role in some of the outcomes, because obviously some people don't suffer from anticholinergics. Some people, it's not like 100% of the people who use anticholinergics all develop memory problems. So the people that don't are the most interesting to me. Like, okay, what are you doing differently? What's different about you?
Well, yeah, it's a really good point you bring up about the medications and how, they may or may not have a positive effect. And one thing I want to mention, since we are psychologists first, Dr. Delano-Wood and I, is that there are psychological interventions for sleep as well that you can do in replacement of medications or as you're kind of reducing your medications. Because you're right, we don't really want to take a medication that's going to make us lay still, but really disrupt our sleep in general. And so there's interventions through cognitive behavioral therapy and sleep hygiene, as we call it, that can really help improve your sleep. And so some of the simple things are to not do things in your bed that aren't sleeping. So don't watch TV in your bed, don't eat in your bed. If you're having trouble falling asleep, don't just lay in bed awake, don't keep looking at the phone, but maybe get up and go sit in a quiet area until you start feeling drowsy and then go back to bed, so that we can really associate the bed with sleep. And just making that association with bed with sleep can really help improve your sleep architecture and your sleep quality. So considering even, not just alternative medications, but also alternative interventions or strategies is another really important thing to consider across a range of the conditions that anticholinergics are prescribed for.
Yeah. I want to take our last commercial break. And did you have something you wanted to throw in there, Dr. Delano-Wood?
No, I was saying I couldn't have said it any better. I think that often we reach for maybe the quickest answer or maybe the easiest thing, which is to get a script from our doctor, take some sort of medication. But there are so many studies out there showing that a lot of these more behavioral strategies actually have more longer term benefits and sort of last longer in helping improve sleep quality in a lot of individuals. So, and then it's also, I think, important to be, if sleep is such a problem, to be assessed. They have these things you can sort of take home and you kind of wear it while you're sleeping, and it can sort of show the sleep specialist exactly where of the 20 issues this could be, exactly what is going on. Is this apnea, for example, which we know is pretty treatable? So, thinking outside of the box, I think, is really important too.
When we come back, I want to pick up on all of that, actually. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about apps that people could download that I've used for years. I measure my sleep 3 different ways because I know it's that important to my longevity and me keeping my job, because if I can't remember things that I talked about years ago, I'm screwed. So let's talk about that on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to Superhuman Radio.
Proper hydration can lead to improved endurance, performance, and recovery. When we sweat, we lose valuable electrolytes that must be replaced. That's why Element created a zero-sugar, science-backed ratio of electrolytes that you can add to your water. It comes in 3 flavors. Sample them all risk-free with the Element Variety Pack. Carl's favorite is raspberry. Free shipping on all U.S. orders. Go to shrnetwork.biz/LMNT and get yours today.
Everybody wants to feel better, be healthier and happier. If you don't sweat profusely on a regular basis, you won't feel as good as you could. Studies have shown the power of infrared sauna. Infrared penetrates 1 to 2 inches into the body. It helps those with back pain, fibromyalgia, arthritis, depression, and anxiety. Patients get relief from infrared sauna. The Good Health Sauna has been shown to be an exercise mimetic, conveying many of the same benefits as cardio. There are a lot of reasons people buy a Good Health Sauna, but the bottom line is you will be a much happier, healthier person by using the Good Health Sauna every day. You'll crave it, you'll love it, and it will be the best purchase you have ever made. Good Health Saunas provide commercial-grade saunas for in-home and commercial use, backed by the best lifetime warranty in the industry. Unmatched customer service and the best financing makes owning one easy and will fit any budget. Go to goodhealthsauna.com/superhumanradio to learn more and save 25% off.
I love beef. And if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender, with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA.
Get 25% off all beef and free shipping on orders of $100 or more
at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again.
Are you still on the fence about Body Protection Complex BPC Oral from drseeds.com? Listen to Maggie Kuhn, one of the owners of the C-Bus Lifting Company gym in Columbus, Ohio.
I had been having some nagging tendon issues that weren't injuries, just things that were annoying. You know, I'm 58 years old, so just older tendon kind of issues. For us powerlifters, you know, we really don't stop training when we have just nagging issues. We just kind of keep pushing through. And I started the BPC. What I noticed was I was doing some heavy tricep stuff that would have killed me before when I had an elbow problem, and I was able to do that with literally no pain at all.
Go to drseeds.com, drseeds.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your bottle of BPC Body Protection Complex today.
Mind Bullet is a kratom product derived from the coffee family to boost energy and creative juices. Mind Bullet comes in both pill and liquid form for the ultimate pre-workout supplement. When needing a little pick-me-up or to get through the morning fog, Mind Bullet will set your productive course fast. Go to shrnetwork.biz/mindbullet, all one word, today, and save 20%. No subscription required. That's shrnetwork.biz/mindbullet. Get yours today.
Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back to Superhuman Radio. We're talking with Dr. Lisa Delano-Wood and Alex Weigand about a study linking some anticholinergic drugs to problems and development of Alzheimer's disease. It makes perfect sense. Thanks to Dr. Dale Bredesen's research, we know that Alzheimer's disease in a lot of cases can be reversed if you remove all of the different insults. That's everything from going to sleep on time, not eating right before bedtime, hormone adjustments sometimes for some people, dietary adjustments for some people. So the nice thing about Alzheimer's and some of these cognitive declines that we see in people is that they respond pretty effectively to lifestyle changes. Then that's exciting to me, because it's, it doesn't mean that you've got this and you have to have it for the rest of your life if you are well informed. So some of the things that I use at bedtime to help me sleep that don't impair cognition, at least for me, I use a fairly moderate dose of melatonin, 3 milligrams. I use 3 grams of glycine. Glycine is an amino acid that increases brain GABA, but it works better than just taking GABA, because taking GABA by itself can have some excitatory effects for some people, but glycine makes you tired and sleepy. And then the other thing is I take a very, very low dose of magnesium citrate, because magnesium is another one of those. It's a mineral, but it seems to have a kind of relaxes the brain a little bit. And I use these. I've used these for years, and my stock in trade is my memory. Being able to talk about an interview and then think about an interview I did 6 years ago and inject it. I think that there's lots of beneficial things that people can use to help sleep. But one of the most profound things that I discovered, which most people will shudder at the idea of not having their cell phone on all night long on their nightstand. Because I know we're all brain surgeons and all of us have a brain coming in on the frozen brain that we have to replace tomorrow morning. And we can't sleep through that phone call. But, there's so much good research out there that shows that RF, generally above 900 megahertz, has such a profound excitatory effect on the brain that it will even cause deep sleep latency up to an hour. If you take a phone call on a cell phone and hold it up against your head, and it's a 20-minute phone call, that will keep you from getting into deep sleep by almost an hour. I mean, there's so many things that we do that are causing some of these memory problems that we have, because the nighttime, at bedtime, that's when the brain defrags the hard drive. That's when it does all its hard work and indexes stuff so you can remember it later on. And it's just amazing to me how many things we do today, right up to, I put blue blockers on at night 2 hours before I want to go to bed, so that blue light isn't telling my adrenal glands, hey, it's still daytime. No, now I want to just shut it off and go to bed, and I'm laying there thinking about every single thing I did that day. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help preserve memory storage and cognition, but unfortunately, they're not popular in today's high-tech environment. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm not very familiar with the research area, but I think it makes sense that the radio frequency oscillations can impact your brain oscillations, right? I mean, it's all, in the end, an electrical current. And I do think where having your phone away from bed at night can help is also if you're having difficulty falling asleep. I think we all have a tendency to keep checking our phone, right? Or right before bed, we kind of scroll through our emails or social media or something. And one, the blue light, as you mentioned, it confuses our brain and makes us think that it's daytime and not nighttime. And two, it really keeps our brain kind of active and alert, right? Because we're engaging in these things with our phone, rather than kind of calming down, doing some breathing exercises, and making sure that our body is really ready for sleep. And as we mentioned before, we know that sleep is so important in the progression of Alzheimer's disease, and modifying your sleep to make it of a higher quality can really reduce the progression and slow the progression of Alzheimer's. So I think you're absolutely right that working on these environmental modifiable risk factors is the best thing we can do for Alzheimer's right now at this time where we don't have a medical cure for it.
Great.
What do you think? Dr. Delano-Wood.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better. I agree. And then you have the additional people watching TV from their beds, late, and and that can definitely interfere as well. And I think Alex's point about just checking email before bed, and even if you think you can consciously block that stuff out, it's still there. You're still worrying about, oh gosh, tomorrow I've got X, Y, and Z going on, and I have this deadline over here, and that's there, and that can definitely interfere. But I don't know as much about radio frequency work, but and I don't know how much that truly is being studied, or at least in a clinically translational way. But definitely interesting thoughts.
It is, and you know where most of the good research is coming from? Scandinavia, because they've had cell phones way longer than we have, and every Scandinavian person in Sweden, they know you don't leave your cell phone on next to your bed, because even if you have it on silent, that thing is talking to the cell tower all night long. And I know when I accidentally leave my cell phone on, because I wake up in the morning and I feel like I didn't sleep, and oh my God, I left my cell phone on. I know it for a fact. But you know who I blame for all of these problems? Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen. Because in the movie Wall Street, Gordon Gekko is walking on the beach in Pacific Palisades, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's coming up, and he's on his cell phone, and Bud Fox is still asleep. And he says, "You don't make money while you're asleep." And people heard that, and they thought, oh, wow. Yeah, it's like now I have a friend. I'm not going to mention his name. He was building a company, and he was not sleeping like for a couple years, and he got colon cancer. And I swear to God, I'm telling you, when you become metabolically deranged, cancer and all these other diseases just come in and swoop down on you. But people today think sleep is optional. Oh yeah, I don't have to sleep. I'm going to wake up, stay all night, and I'm sleep 3 hours. Trust me, you do that long enough. That's one of the things that Dr. Dale Bredesen, one of his interventions, you go to sleep at 9 o'clock every single night, and you don't eat 3 hours before bedtime. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think we see in academia, you have a contingent sometimes of folks who they kind of wear it as a badge of honor. I only require 3 hours of sleep at night, and
good luck with that.
I think it's a good point. And, that's one thing I can say about our field of neuropsychology is that we are pretty up on sleep, sleep deprivation, poor sleep quality. What does this mean for brain health? And trying to better understand those links, because it is all very complicated. There are a number of variables that are sort of intervening there, including negative mood. How does that impact sleep? In this pandemic, we're not getting as much exercise. We're not getting outside as much. Vitamin D levels. There's just so much to consider. But it's a clear. There is no debate that poor sleep is predictive of Alzheimer's onset in the general population.
So I'm going to put this one question up here, and I don't expect you guys to answer it. But so do you know what deep sleep inducing peptide is? We did a show about it about 4 years ago.
No, you're educating us a lot here on a number of fronts.
Well, it's a gray area peptide that but you have to inject it first thing in the morning. This is what people don't get. They buy a DSIP and they inject it before bed, and it wrecks your sleep. But what it does is it synchronizes circadian rhythm. So you take it first thing in the morning, and you get deeper sleep that evening, and it does work. So Danny Geraldo, who lives in Colombia and watches the show, he said, would it be useful to include DSIP and melatonin to improve sleep? I don't think you guys want to talk about DSIP, but what about melatonin? Are you fans of melatonin?
It's not our area of expertise. We might know a little bit from just what we've heard in the media. For me, I would say the data that I'm aware of, and this may be a few years old, are kind of equivocal. Some studies showing a link to improved sleep, and other studies showing not so much. And so that's sort of what I recall. But I certainly have seen in the clinic patients who swear by it and really believe that this has done more for them than any other medication they've tried. Alex, are you as familiar with the melatonin?
I'm not very familiar with the literature, but what I can say is, and speaking to our study, is that we are aware that melatonin does not affect the cholinergic system, whereas some other sleep drugs do. So in that sense, I think it can be a possible good alternative to maybe some of the other options, or at least a good starting point.
So, Peter, we're talking about anticholinergic drugs. So he's asking what class of drugs he came in late. And then the last question that I don't think we can answer, about a small percentage of people who require less sleep than the rest of the population. I've read that before, but I don't buy it, to be honest with you. I think there's some people who can get by with less sleep, but metabolically, you know, sleep is so profoundly important. It creates onset of type 2 diabetes. Like even just one night, they did a study in Colorado with Olympic athletes, and they forced them to have only 5 hours of sleep 2 nights in a row. And their blood sugar management was that of an 80-year-old. They became completely metabolically deranged after 2 nights of short sleep. So when it comes to sleep, I think that, I'm sure there's some rats that like to be up in the daytime, but most of them are up at night. And I'm sure there's some humans that maybe they can get by with a little less sleep, but by and large, no. Listen, I want to thank you both for being on the show today. This is fascinating. And I really think this is very, very important research, because there's a lot of people who take these drugs over the counter and prescribed. That's why they may be overdosing on it. They've got this drug with it, then they got this over the counter product that they're using. And this is, many of them could, if they remove this insult, they could regain their normal cognition, perhaps. Who knows?
We wonder about that, and we would recommend that folks, A, talk to their physicians, ask about the meds that they're on, ask about the dosing, and then B, you can find on the internet, it's called the Anticholinergic Burden Scale. Is that right? Anticholinergic Cognitive, yeah. Anticholinergic Burden Scale, ABS, and it'll list all the medications that have known anticholinergic effects, and then better than that, it kind of ranks them from sort of least bad to the very worst. And so they're coded either a number 1, a 2, or a 3, 3 being the worst. And so some of the like tricyclic medications for depression are on there. Benadryl is a 3. I believe Dramamine even is there. Of course, NyQuil, those kinds of things. So it can be very useful, can be very helpful for people to be empowered in that way, understand what they're taking, and then engage frequently with their physicians about the medications that they're taking and the benefits that they're getting.
Yeah. Don't just stop taking.
Yeah, exactly. I completely echo what Dr. Delano-Wood said. Do your own research, kind of, and empower yourself, but make sure to talk to your physician to work out a plan if you plan to switch any of these medications or stop taking any of these medications.
Yep.
And especially if you're starting to notice memory decline. If you're starting to, I forgot where I put my keys 6 days in a row, definitely have this conversation with your physician. In fact, 100%. Have a conversation, say, am I on any anticholinergic drugs that you've prescribed for me? You may not realize they're anticholinergic. There's so many of them. The ones for women, bladder incontinence. There's some powerful anticholinergic drugs that women are taking for bladder incontinence.
Well, and men too. Yeah. Oxybutynin is a big one that there is starting to get more widespread awareness about that particular medication, thankfully. It's just recognizing when people are on that and immediately making changes.
And I'll also just say, if anyone is experiencing memory decline or cognitive problems, in addition to talking with your primary care physician, you can consider seeking out a neuropsychologist, which is what Dr. Delano-Wood is and what I'm training to be, because we really do specialize in assessing your cognitive and daily function to try to figure out if there's something that may be going on and what we can do to help.
Right. And sooner rather than later. I think, we often see folks coming into the clinic and there's already been kind of a lot of, insult to the brain. And so, yes, I was going to say exactly what Alex said in closing. Definitely bring it up. And even if it might be kind of scary to say, hey, I don't know, my memory doesn't seem as good as it used to be. And I wonder if it's outside of what you would expect for normal aging. Can you refer me to a neurologist or a neuropsychologist? I think that's an important question to ask, and make sure to bring that up at your next eval.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Great interview. I love the research. I hope that if you discover something new, that you come back and talk about it. And if you happen to use one of the ideas discussed on this show, maybe you can put my name on something. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll circle back to you. I think Alex has I think we have your contact information. And stay tuned to Alex Weigand. Because
believe me, you don't want my name on your paper. You don't want my name on your paper.
Well, you've certainly
look,
given
thanks for
us
being here.
a lot of food for thought. You've given us,
Definitely.
and we really appreciate. This is really, really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, we appreciate the platform. Thank you.
There you go. Take care.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
We have a couple things to talk about the show, so stay tuned. We shall return. Guys, you've heard about this revolutionary acoustic wave technology that improves your sexual performance. It's been used in Europe for 20 years and has a 90% success rate of reversing symptoms of ED. Even if you're not suffering from ED, it can take you back to peak sexual performance of your younger days. The Phoenix uses powerful sound waves to clear plaque blockage and substantially increase blood flow. It's easy to use, has no side effects, and can be done in the privacy of your own home. Doctors have been charging thousands of dollars for these treatments. Go to SHR Network Phoenix and use the code SHR for a special superhuman deal. Regain your sexual prowess today.
When craving a snack, reach for Select Savory Snack Sugar-Free Biltong, the healthy alternative to sugar-laden beef jerky. They use a fattier cut of beef, making it more tender and flavorful. For mealtime, choose from their 63 seasonings, which are sugar and additive-free. From chipotle rub to savory pumpkin spice, you'll find an option to suit your palate. Go to shrnetwork.biz/SSS today. Use code SHR15 to save 15% on any meat snack or seasoning. Savor the flavor today.
My friends over at Bioptimizers, makers of industry-leading digestive supplements, have created a special recipe for you that helps boost brain performance in the morning. They make products Primergen V and Primergen M, potent liquid vitamins and mineral formulas loaded with absorbable vitamin Bs and trace minerals in a fulvic and humic acid base. You stack that with 3 capsules of Capex, their enzyme and energy supplement, and the effect is even stronger. You'll be buzzing without jitters or any negative side effects for hours. Bioptimizers calls this the Brain Boost Stack, and they're running a special promotion for you at shrnetwork.biz/brainstack. That's shrnetwork.biz/BRAINSTACK. You can get an additional 10% off from the normal package price with the coupon code SHR10. It's a powerful way to get your brain going and optimize your daily focus, memory, and performance.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Want to improve mental energy and focus? Try the new Superhuman Stack from Pure Nootropics. Stack Dynamins, L-Butamin, Theocrine, and palmitoyl ethanolamide together and feel the lights go on in your brain. Find your perfect mix of these 4. Carl likes 1 cap of each and 2 caps of Dynamin. Bam! Lights on. Go to shrnetwork.biz/superhuman stack, all one word, today, and get yours for 25% off plus free shipping. That's shrnetwork.biz/superhuman stack. New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back. Sleep is probably the most important thing in memory function. When we talk about Alzheimer's disease and dementia, almost all of these people, they either drink alcohol before bed to help them get to sleep, or they drink a lot of alcohol and they think it's helping them sleep. We have destroyed our sleep in this country. When I was a young man, I'm 62 years old now. When I was a young man, TV stations went off at midnight. So there was nothing to watch after midnight. People didn't have the option of turning their TV on at 2:00 in the morning and watching something. And more and more people got good sleep. And I really think a lot of it has to do with the amount of RF that we live in today. The studies on how RF excites the brain at night when you have your cell phone next to your bed or you don't unplug your router like I do. I know people think I'm crazy, I unplugged the router. I unplugged the cordless phone. No cell phones on. Now, there's nothing I can do about the router in my neighbor's house. The new home we just bought a new home, and it's on an acre of land. And so we have definitely a lot more space between us and the neighbor, but RF travels. It's not like as though that space is going to save me. I'm going to do an experiment. The new master bedroom is going to be completely RF retardant. There will be no RF getting into the bedroom. And I'll divulge more of this. And I'm even going to do a little plan so you can do it yourself at home. But you can completely block radio frequency from getting into your room if you want to. And then, you know how people go on vacation, they go camping. They say, oh, I slept so good. Oh, because I was off the grid. You can create a room in your home where you can be off the grid. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to take all of you with me when I do it and show you how I do it. And these are all things that you can buy on your own. I've already put together a shopping list. And you could actually make an RF-free room. And I predict I'm going to sleep better. Elisa's going to sleep better. And I predict that I'm going to notice a difference in how I feel after sleeping in it for a couple months. So I will take you all on that journey with me very shortly. We should be moving into the new house in a couple weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm going to have the painter use a special paint that I've acquired. And we're going to put window dressings up that are RF repellent. And we are going to put something on. It's a hardwood floor, but we're going to put an area rug in. So I'll probably have a small space around the periphery of the room. Maybe I can block it from beneath as opposed to on top. But I think I'll be able to get about 90% of all the RF out of my environment when I sleep. And I'm really excited about this. So stay tuned. I will share the blueprint, if you will, so you can do it yourself as I experiment with it and do it myself. And that's really it for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Anticholinergic drugs, they're everywhere. So if you have an elderly loved one, find out if they're taking any of these drugs to sleep or for anything like that. And if you notice their memory declining, you need to help them stop using those drugs. All right, we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio. Thank you for watching and listening today.